Veteran Jack McFarlane was sitting on the porch of his Auckland home, looking out at the ocean. His hands, covered with scars and age spots, held the faded photograph tightly. It shows young men in military uniforms smiling at the camera somewhere in the deserts of North Africa. "Do you see that kid on the right?" He pointed with a trembling finger. It was Tommy Rogers from Christchurch. He died at Monte Casino, covering our retreat. He was only 22. Jack paused, his eyes moist. "We were farmers, shepherds, and simple workers. But when the war started, we became something more." The story of the 2nd New Zealand Division in World War II is a story about how a small island nation with a population of only 1.6 million people created one of the most effective and respected combat units in the history of modern warfare with 140,000 people. This is a story about the bravery, endurance and indomitable spirit of people who fought for freedom on the other side of the world. From peaceful fields to battlefields. When Great Britain declared war on Nazi Germany on September 3, 1939, New Zealand, as a loyal member of the British Commonwealth, immediately followed suit. Prime Minister Michael Joseph Savage made a speech that went down in history: "Where Britain goes, we go. Where Britain stands, we stand." The formation of the 2nd New Zealand Expeditionary Army began almost immediately. A country that has barely recovered from the economic effects of the Great Depression has mobilized its limited resources with remarkable efficiency. Young men from all over the country, from the sheep farms of Canterbury, from the port cities of Auckland and Wellington, from the wild shores of the South Island, volunteered by the thousands. For many it was a chance to see the world, for others it was a sacred duty, and for some it was just the right thing to do. The command of this army was entrusted to Lieutenant General Bernard Cyril Freyberg, a legendary figure who had already become famous in the First World War. Freyberg was not just a military leader, he was a symbol of New Zealand resilience. Wounded 9 times in World War I, and awarded the Victoria Cross for his unparalleled bravery, this man possessed a unique ability to inspire his soldiers and win their boundless devotion. The 2nd New Zealand Division was modelled after the British Imperial Divisions, but with some unique features reflecting the nature and needs of the New Zealand Army. It consisted of 3 infantry brigades, the 4th, 5th and 6th, each of which consisted of 3 battalions. In addition to infantry, the division included powerful artillery support, engineering units, intelligence units, and extensive logistics services. What distinguished the New Zealand Division from many other Allied formations was its relative autonomy and cohesion. While many armies suffered from staff turnover and the constant replacement of losses by soldiers from other units, the New Zealanders tried to maintain the integrity of their units. It created an incredible sense of camaraderie and martial brotherhood. The soldiers knew each other, trusted their commanders, and understood the strengths and weaknesses of their comrades. By the end of the war, about 140,000 New Zealanders were serving abroad, almost 9% of the country's total population. Imagine the scale of this mobilization. Almost every family in the country had someone at the front. The price was appalling: 11.9 thousand dead, tens of thousands injured. For a small nation, it was a huge sacrifice, a scar that remained in the national consciousness for generations to come. The first real baptism of fire for the 2nd New Zealand Division was the disastrous campaign in Greece in the spring of 1941. The British command, wishing to support the Greeks in their fight against the Italian and German invasion, sent expeditionary forces, including New Zealanders, to the Balkans. This decision later turned out to be a strategic mistake, but for the New Zealand soldiers it became the first test in a real war against the German Wehrmacht. New Zealand units took up defensive positions on the Aliakman Line and in the area of Mount Olympus, the legendary mountain of the Greek gods. When German troops attacked the Allied positions on April 6, desperate resistance began. The New Zealanders faced overwhelming enemy forces supported by aircraft and armored vehicles. Despite the enemy's numerical superiority, they fought with a tenacity that surprised even seasoned German veterans. The retreat through the mountains of Greece turned into a nightmare. Under constant attacks by the Luftwaffe, pursued by German tank units, the New Zealanders fought rearguard battles, allowing the main forces to withdraw to the ports for evacuation. Many units were cut off and captured, but those who were able to break through evacuated to Crete. If the Greek campaign was a retreat, then the Battle of Crete was an epic defense. In May 1941, the Germans launched Operation Mercury, the first large-scale airborne invasion in history. Thousands of German paratroopers from elite Fallschirmjäger units began landing on the island, which was defended by British, New Zealand, Australian and Greek troops. New Zealand units took the brunt of the attack near Maleme Airfield, a strategically important facility, control of which would determine the outcome of the entire battle. The 22nd Battalion, under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Leslie Wilfred Andrew, was in the midst of the battle. German paratroopers fell from the sky directly onto the New Zealanders' positions, and a fierce hand-to-hand battle began. Eyewitnesses described scenes of incredible cruelty and bravery. The New Zealanders shot paratroopers in the air, launched bayonet attacks on enemy groups that landed, and fought for every house and trench. One New Zealand soldier recalled, "They were falling everywhere, into trees, into the water, right at our positions. We fired until we ran out of bullets, then grabbed their weapons and continued the fight." Despite heroic resistance, the Germans eventually captured Maleme airfield, which allowed them to transfer reinforcements and turn the tide of the battle. The New Zealanders were forced to evacuate again, this time to North Africa. However, their resistance in Crete inflicted such losses on the German airborne forces that Hitler never again decided on large-scale amphibious operations. Desert Wars. In North Africa, the 2nd New Zealand Division became one of the key units of the 8th Army, which fought against Erwin Rommel's legendary Afrika Korps. Desert warfare required completely different skills than fighting in Greece and Crete. It was a war of movement, maneuver, lightning strikes and swift retreats in the endless sands of Libya and Egypt. New Zealanders quickly adapted to the new conditions. Their rural background again proved to be an advantage. Many were experienced drivers and mechanics, knew how to navigate the terrain and survive in harsh conditions. They learned how to fight in the desert, mastered the tactics of mobile groups, night raids and ambushes. One of the most dramatic episodes of the North African campaign was the breakthrough from Minka Kajayam in June 1942. The division found itself surrounded by superior enemy forces in the area of this small position. The situation seemed hopeless. Ammunition was running out, water was running out, and German tanks were squeezing the ring. Freiberg made a risky decision to break through with a fight. On the night of June 27th, the New Zealanders attacked German positions. It was a desperate dash. Infantry on trucks, artillery, tanks and armored vehicles rushed through the enemy lines. Chaotic battles ensued in the dark, where the opponents converged almost closely. The New Zealanders broke through, although they suffered heavy losses. El Alamein became the highlight of the 2nd New Zealand Division. In the First Battle of El Alamein in July 1942, the New Zealanders held a critical area of defense, repelling the fierce attacks of Rommel, who was desperately trying to break through to Cairo and the Suez Canal. Their resilience helped stop the last offensive of the Afrika Korps. In the Second Battle of El Alamein in October to November 1942, which was a turning point in the North African campaign, the New Zealand Division played a key role in breaking through the German defenses. Under the command of the new commander of the 8th Army, Bernard Montgomery, the Allies dealt a crushing blow to the Axis forces. The New Zealanders broke through German minefields, captured key heights and pursued the retreating enemy across Libya. Italian hell. After the victory in North Africa and a brief rest in Egypt, the 2nd New Zealand Division was sent to Italy in late 1943. The Italian campaign proved to be the longest and bloodiest for the New Zealanders. The mountainous terrain, fortified German defensive lines, and harsh weather turned the Allied advance into an excruciating slaughter. The first serious test was the crossing of the Sangro River in November 1943. The New Zealanders had to cross a cold, fast river under enemy fire. The operation was carried out at night in icy water. The soldiers, holding their weapons above their heads, waded across, being shelled. Many died right in the water, but the New Zealanders seized a bridgehead on the opposite shore and held it despite German counterattacks. Monte Cassino was the culmination of the Italian campaign. The ancient Benedictine monastery, crowning a 520-meter-high mountain, dominated the valley and blocked the way for the Allies to roam. The Germans turned this area into an almost impregnable fortress. The New Zealand Division participated in the Second Battle of Monte Cassino in March 1944. After a massive bombing turned the monastery into ruins which, paradoxically, only improved the defensive positions of the Germans, the New Zealanders attacked the town of Cassino at the foot of the mountain. A fierce urban battle began, house by house, street by street, room by room. The veterans called it Little Stalingrad. The battles were fought in the ruins, in the basements, among the ruins. German paratroopers defended every position with fanatical tenacity. The New Zealanders used tanks as mobile firing points, advancing meter by meter. One New Zealand officer wrote home, "This is not a war, this is murder. We measure progress not in kilometers, but in the ruins of houses." After weeks of bloody fighting, the offensive collapsed. The New Zealand Division was withdrawn from the battle to replenish losses and rest. Monte Cassino eventually fell only in May 1944 after the Fourth Offensive. However, the contribution of the New Zealanders to this battle was invaluable. They tied up significant German forces and inflicted heavy losses on the enemy. Secrets of success: what made them special? What turned farmers and workers from a remote island nation into one of the most effective fighting forces of the Second World War? The answer lies in a combination of several factors. First, the leadership of Freyberg. The general was not just a commander, he was the father of his division. He fiercely defended the autonomy of New Zealand troops, often coming into conflict with the British High Command when he believed his soldiers were being misused or put at unnecessary risk. The soldiers knew that Tiny, as they called him by his nickname, was taking care of them, and they paid him with boundless loyalty. Secondly, the command system. The New Zealand Army encouraged initiative at all levels. The officers were trained to make independent decisions in a rapidly changing environment. Unlike the more rigid hierarchy of other armies, the New Zealanders practiced what is now called task-based command. Officers were given a goal rather than detailed instructions on how to achieve it. This made the division incredibly flexible and able to react quickly to changes in the situation. Thirdly, the social composition. Many New Zealand soldiers came from rural areas: farmers, shepherds, lumberjacks. They were physically resilient, accustomed to hard work and harsh conditions. They were able to improvise, repair machinery with improvised means, and survive with minimal resources. These skills proved invaluable during the war. Finally, cohesion. The New Zealanders fought not as a motley collection of individuals, but as a family. They knew that they were defending not only their country, but also their comrades nearby. It created incredible combat motivation. A soldier might be willing to risk his life for the abstract idea of freedom, but he certainly risked it so as not to let his friends down. The legacy of the brave. When the war ended, New Zealand soldiers returned home as heroes. But many of them carried with them invisible scars, traumas that we now call post-traumatic stress disorder. Like veterans of all wars, they faced difficulties adapting to civilian life. Some people never talked about what they had experienced, taking their memories to the grave. Friends, subscribe to the channel, put likes and write your comments.